The U.S. Attorney General has reported to Congress the results of Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. ISIS no longer holds any ground. Expect it back in cyberspace. LockerGoga ransomware hits 2 chemical plants. FEMA mishandles more than 2 million disaster victims' PII. Notes on Cyber 912. And there's a squabble for YouTube subscribers. Now a moment to tell you about our sponsor, ThreatConnect. Designed by analysts but built for the entire team, ThreatConnect's intelligence-driven security operations platform is the only solution available today with intelligence, automation, analytics, and workflows in a single platform. Every day, organizations worldwide use ThreatConnect as the center of their security operations to detect, respond, remediate, and automate. With all of your knowledge in one place, enhanced by intelligence, enriched with analytics, driven by workflows, you'll dramatically improve the effectiveness of every member of the team. Want to learn more? Check out their newest ebook, SOAR Platforms. Everything you need to know about security, orchestration, automation, and response. The book talks about intelligence-driven orchestration, decreasing time to response and remediation with SOAR, and ends with a checklist for a complete SOAR solution. Download it at threatconnect.com/cyberwire. That's threatconnect.com/cyberwire. And we thank ThreatConnect for sponsoring our show. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Monday, March 25, 2019. Special Counsel Robert Mueller closed his probe of Russian election meddling with a report to the U.S. Attorney General Friday. Sunday afternoon, Reuters tweeted that Attorney General Barr informed Congress that the investigation found no knowing collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian actors. The Attorney General's letter to the Senate and House Judiciary Committees summarized the investigation into Russian influence operations. Those operations followed 2 broad directions of attack: trolling from Russia's Internet Research Agency and attacks on Democratic Party networks. In these matters, the special counsel found that neither, quote, the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election, end quote. Special counsel Mueller declined to make a recommendation on obstruction of justice, where the evidence is complicated and indistinct, and the Attorney General sees nothing to warrant charges. As the letter continues, quote, after reviewing the special counsel's final report on these issues, consulting with department officials, including the Office of Legal Counsel, and applying the principles of federal prosecution that guide our charging decisions, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Our determination was made without regard to, and is not based on, the constitutional considerations that surround the indictment and criminal prosecution of a sitting president. End quote. The special counsel will not recommend any further indictments. The full text of the Mueller report is expected to be released after the Justice Department reviews it to redact any information the Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure precludes the department from disclosing. ISIS and its caliphate now officially controls no territory, having been ejected from its last enclaves in Syria. Its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, remains at large or at least unaccounted for. So does much of the terrorist group's money. Its adherents intend to continue jihad through the Dar al-Harb, which is where most of you listeners reside. ISIS has shown small capability to conduct cyber attacks properly considered, but it has been and can be expected to remain active online with inspiration and recruitment. Kaspersky Lab reports that Asus laptops were infected with malware via the company's automatic updating system. Kaspersky calls the campaign Operation Shadowhammer. There's no attribution yet, and Asus hasn't commented publicly, but Kaspersky says they've notified the Taiwan-based manufacturer and that Asus is working on the problem. Operation Shadowhammer appears to have been conducted between June and November of last year and may have affected 51,000 users. The LockerGoga ransomware that afflicted Norsk Hydro has hit two U.S. chemical companies, Hexion and Momentive. This brings to 4 the number of known victims of LockerGoga. The first was Altran, the French engineering consultancy hit in January, and the second was Norsk Hydro, best known for aluminum production, which sustained a LockerGoga infection earlier this month. Norsk Hydro has largely completed its recovery, and both Hexion and Momentive have theirs underway. On Friday, the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, acknowledged improperly disclosing disaster victims' personally identifiable information to an unauthorized third party. The people affected were victims of 2017's California wildfires and of Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. Some 2.3 million people's data were exposed in what the Washington Post calls the biggest data breach to occur under the current administration. It's not clear whether any crimes have been committed on the basis of the lost data, but if nothing else, the incident will test the government's express determination to hold officials responsible for mishandling data. FEMA has declined to name the contractor with whom it overshared. The PCI Software Security Council recently published a new software security framework, including the PCI Secure Software Standard and the PCI Secure Software Lifecycle. Rohit Sethi is Chief Operating Officer at Security Compass, and he shares his thoughts on what it all means.
It is much more in-depth on the requirements for people producing software to make sure that software is secure. Now, at this point, it's just the standards. There is no program around it, meaning there isn't anything rolled out yet that says when it's going to be mandatory for specific participants in the payment ecosystem, but we expect that to happen later this year. I think there's two ways to think about this. There's one from the standard itself, right? And so, for example, if you're a payment application vendor, what will happen is that instead of having to go through the standard PA DSS process, you'll eventually be moving to the software security standard, and the two programs will be rolled into one. Practically, what that means is that there's going to be a degree of scrutiny in the way that you produce software and how secure that software is that we haven't really seen from other compliance mandates before. Now, the standard itself, there's actually two standards. One is the software security standard, and one is the secure lifecycle standard. The software security standard is, again, a more in-depth standard on a specific release of software. But one of the things that PCI recognized early on is that as people are moving to Agile and DevOps development, it's simply not feasible to necessarily have every release of software go through this the certification process and still remain nimble and agile and use sort of modern software development processes. So they've introduced this concept of a secure life cycle standard so that instead of having every single release when organizations are sometimes shipping multiple releases in a day, instead of having every one of those releases certified, you can periodically get the software itself certified, and then if you have the development process around it certified, then essentially it allows you to release more frequently without going through the same depth of analysis for every single individual release. If you're somebody who produces software in the payment ecosystem, and specifically payment vendors, you're going to have to at some point actually comply with this standard. Now, there are thoughts about how this might apply to other participants in the ecosystem. At this point, it doesn't necessarily apply to people who have to comply with the PCI DSS. That's the common one I think we mostly think of when we hear PCI, which is a data security standard. But as you know, in the PCI DSS standard, there is actually a section on application security today. And, it's possible that sometime in the future, elements of the software security standard could find their way there. I think a lot of it will depend on how it rolls out and how it's received in industry. The other, I think, bigger impact, if you will, is I believe they're setting a precedent. And if you look at the OWASP Top 10, Open Web Application Security Project Top 10, that was a standard that was developed many, many years ago. In 2006, the PCI Data Security Standard I guess you could say, made OWASP Top 10 popular. People learned about this idea that there are 10 really common application security risks. And what happened was, after PCI adopted it, it was almost, I won't say every single other standard followed PCI, but something like 30 different standards today that all reference the OWASP Top 10. And so PCI has this, I guess you could say, reputation of being kind of a leader from a compliance standpoint. And so what we believe is PCI is stepping up the scrutiny that we're paying on payment applications and payment providers by way of software security that is largely absent from the entire rest of industry. With the exception of a handful of pockets in, like, say, defense and large banks, most industries do not have any mandate to produce secure software. They have other security mandates, but they don't have to build security into the development process. I think it'll be hard for things like, say, industrial Internet of Things providers and automotive manufacturers and telecom and other parts of infrastructure that are really critical to really justify that they don't also make sure the products are very robust and secure in the same way as payments are doing today. So we feel like, PCI is setting a precedent, and other industries are going to follow suit.
That's Rohit Sethi from Security Compass. We were able to spend last Thursday and Friday in Crystal City, Virginia, observing the Atlantic Council's Cyber 912 Strategy Challenge. The competition challenged teams of students to develop policy response recommendations for the U.S. president. The scenario was a tabletop exercise with well-crafted ancillary material. It presented the competing teams with an evolving situation designed to capture much of the ambiguity crises carry. Congratulations to the two winning teams and their coaches. NDU Team 3 of the U.S. National Defense University won the professional track, and the U.S. Air Force Academy's Team de Longrand took top honors in the student track. And congratulations to the other participants as well. The ones we observed represented themselves and their home institutions with credit. We won't go into details about the scenario because we don't want a repetition of the Orson Welles' War of the Worlds moment we had the last time we did so, but we will say that the scenario featured several superficially or perhaps coincidentally related incidents. In any case, the exercise was for the most part conducted under the Chatham House rules and will honor the conventions of non-attribution by confining ourselves to general observations. It was striking how difficult the teams found it to acknowledge and accommodate conditions of uncertainty. The exercise materials intentionally left a great deal in doubt, and most of the teams tended in their recommendations to be more confident in their understanding of the evolving situation than the evidence warranted. The teams also tended to perceive connections among disparate events where in fact no such connection existed and were nothing beyond. Simple correlation, similarity, coincidence, and so forth led many to conclude that the scenario painted a picture of a large-scale coordinated cyber attack by a hostile nation-state. One of the harder lessons to learn is skepticism about our tendency as humans to perceive noise as signal. In the presentations themselves, some of the teams drifted away from considering their audience. A decision briefing is prepared for a particular decision-maker, and its goal is to inform the decision, not to display the briefer's command of their material. One other lesson was drawn by a student we had occasion to speak with. Policy is a lot harder and more complex than technical people tend to think it is. So another interesting exercise by the Atlantic Council, a very good and intelligent effort by all who competed. And finally, ransomware motivated by fandom flares in the fight for the top rank in YouTube. It's between T-Series and, of course, PewDiePie. Mr. Pie's adherents have been distributing PewDiePie ransomware, regarded as a poor copy of ShellLocker, and more recently and dangerously PewCrypt, both with a view to forcing victims to subscribe to Mr. Pie's channel. There is no particular reason to think that Mr. Pie is orchestrating his fans' hacks. But on the other hand, it must be said that YouTube stars, as we've come to call them, hardly offer the most edifying of examples. Stay in school, kids. And now a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. Email is still the number one attack vector the bad guys use, with a whopping 91% of cyber attacks beginning with phishing. But email hacking is much more than phishing and launching malware. Find out how to protect your organization with an on-demand webinar by Roger A. Grimes, KnowBe4's data-driven defense evangelist. Roger walks you through 10 incredible ways you can be hacked by email and how to stop the bad guys. And he also shares a hacking demo by KnowBe4's Chief Hacking Officer, Kevin Mitnick. So check out the 10 incredible ways, including how silent malware launch, remote password hash capture, and rogue rules work, why rogue documents establishing fake relationships and compromising a user's ethics are so effective, details behind clickjacking and web beacons, and how to defend against all of these. Go to knowbe4.com/10 ways to watch the webinar. That's knowbe4.com/1 and 0 WAYS. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Robert M. Lee. He is the CEO at Dragos. Rob, it's always great to have you back. You all at Dragos recently made an announcement, a purchase that's going to benefit a lot of people. What's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely. So our company is a technology company in the ICS or industrial security space. There's a lot of people that want to get started in ICS security, but it may not be really obtainable. There are a lot of companies that want to dip their toe into doing something, but it's very difficult, I think, to go from we're not doing anything today to, hey, we're rolling out an industrial security program. And one of the early companies in this space was a company called Next Defense. So they had a technology that used to be called Sophia and then got rebranded as Integrity. It was a continuous monitoring for the purpose of asset identification tool. One of the actual first passive asset identification tools in the industrial security community came out of Idaho National Labs. And then, of course, Next Defense built a company around it. So we announced that we purchased Next Defense, and so we got access to their product and all. We bought out the company. So by purchasing Next Defense, it allows us to have access to their product as well, which is Integrity. And then a legacy product that we actually had, which was an assessment tool called CyberLens, and had been used in the community for a long time. So we've taken CyberLens, the assessment tool, and Integrity, which is more of a fully professional, continuous monitoring kind of asset identification tool, and we're just making it free to the community. Essentially, if you're in the community, you're welcome to download them for free. They're really meant to help people get a handle on asset identification, or at least a starting place. It's not a full feature asset identification tool. Obviously, we're a company. It's hey, if you really want a professional tool that's going to help you do this long term, as well as threat detection and response and everything else, sure, go buy our product. But hey, for the rest of the community, as a starting place, and especially for the smaller players, just here's a tool to go get started. I think something that we can all agree on is the industrial community is special, and we all care that we keep the lights on and the water going and similar. So one of the cool things about running a company is trying to think about ways to give back to the community. So here the community goes, have the tools, have fun. If you need more, obviously come contact us, but it's mainly we hope this helps the community some.
All right. Well, Robert M. Lee, thanks for joining us. And that's the CyberWire. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Observit, the leading insider threat management platform. Learn more at observit.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. I want to give a special shout out to the newest member of our CyberWire team, Tim Nodar. Tim joins us as a staff writer, and we're excited to be sharing his contributions with all of you. So welcome aboard, Tim. Our CyberWire editor is John Petrick, social media editor Jennifer Iben, technical editor Chris Russell, executive editor Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.